Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the InduSoft Web Studio webinar about grain monitoring and farming automation. My name is Fabio Teresino. I will host this webinar talking pretty much about the advantages of InduSoft Web Studio for this industry, and then I will show some real-world applications, and I invite Mr. Jack Wilson from Wilson-Groom, a system integrator, to talk specifically about real-world projects they developed with InduSoft Web Studio for this industry, and he'll be able to provide additional details about the application and share his experience, the benefits, and his plans for the future. Then we will open for Q&A, and if anyone have any questions, feel free to write them at the WebEx bar on the top of your monitor. You can either use the Q&A box or the chat box to write your questions at any time. So at the end of the presentation, Mr. Wilson and myself will be glad to answer your questions. So just an overview about the main and unique advantages of InduSoft Web Studio that are quite important for grain monitoring applications and farming automation applications in general. First of all is the fact that InduSoft Web Studio is a complete HMI SCADA package that integrates all the features you need to read data from the devices, to communicate with the controllers, save data to databases, to history files, SQL relational databases, create graphical screens to monitor online data, history data, provide a dashboard interface so you can read data from the history and provide some dashboards with meaningful information about the information. It has recipe management tools built in the package, thin clients, so you have the ability to visualize the application from any devices, and built-in tools for remote notification. So InduSoft can send alarms, alerts, reports automatically by email or text message. And it runs on any Microsoft operating system. As the system evolves, new operating systems become available, new platforms become available, new networks and protocols become available, and InduSoft keeps evolving the product according to those needs. So if you develop an application with InduSoft Web Studio, as new platforms become available, you can very easily migrate to those new platforms, not having to redesign the application. So all those advantages, all those features are built in the product, and obviously it's a very user-friendly interface. That's probably the most important feature and advantage of InduSoft Web Studio. The product is a rapid application development environment. So you configure the application instead of programming it. So talking about the different areas I mentioned in the introduction, the first one, the communication interfaces. In InduSoft Web Studio, we provide more than 240 native communication drivers to different protocols, different industries, different standards in the industry, including Modbus, TCP, Modbus, Serial, RTU, or ASCII, communication drivers for different controllers, PLCs, from Omron, Beckhoff, Allen Bradley, Siemens, GE, Fenix, Opto22, Advantech, ICP-DAS, and many others. In addition to the native drivers, InduSoft Web Studio also has a complete set of OPC client interfaces. So we have been working with the OPC Foundation since 1998. InduSoft is one of the early members and adopters of the OPC interface. We do not force the customers to use OPC. OPC is an option in the product, but should you need to use OPC or want for a given architecture, it's fully supported on the product. Not only the classic OPC-DA, but also OPC XML, .NET, and UA. InduSoft was even the first HMI SCADA to release a fully functional OPC.NET and OPC UA client on the market. Finally, for all the communication drivers, all the serial communication drivers, InduSoft has a built-in feature called serial encapsulation, which allows you just by selecting an option here in a combo box to encapsulate any serial protocol over TCP/IP, UDP/IP, or through a modem. So if you need to communicate with remote devices, RTUs, remote IOs, controllers, PLCs, through a serial interface, but obviously the devices are far and you cannot use just a serial cable, InduSoft allows you to configure the serial drivers just like a peer-to-peer communication or RS-485 network, but instead of using a serial physical link, you can encapsulate the protocol using a modem or a adapter from Ethernet to serial through TCP/IP to serial or UDP/IP to serial. And everything else works the same way for InduSoft Web Studio. So especially for remote devices that support serial protocol but are far away from the SCADA HMI station, you can use this feature to communicate with them through modems or serial to Ethernet adapters. After reading data from those devices, from the remote IOs, RTUs, PLCs, controllers, you can save the information into the InduSoft proprietary history files or to any SQL relational database, anyone you or your end user wants to use. Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, MySQL, even historians like OzzyPy, and InduSoft running on any Windows platform, Windows CE, Windows 7, Windows 2003 Server, Windows 2008 Server. So InduSoft running on any Windows platform can read data from the devices and save data to SQL relational databases in the local computer or even remote databases. InduSoft has even a patent for this technology, and it's very, very simple to set it up, even with redundancy or with connection with the remote databases. Then after reading data through the drivers or OPC interface and saving data, the history data to databases, you can use the graphical interface from InduSoft Web Studio to create your graphical screens, even your dashboards, retrieving data from the databases and presenting the data in a meaningful way on the screen with a very rich graphical interface. So a few weeks ago, we presented a webinar showing a new add-on for InduSoft Web Studio called Business Intelligence Dashboard Templates. You can see a screenshot here. And using this template, which is just an application created with InduSoft Web Studio, you can customize your dashboards with different charts, pie charts, Pareto graphs, reading data from any SQL relational databases. And even if you do not use the add-on, you can use the native tools from InduSoft Web Studio to customize your dashboards and combine online data with history data in any way and fashion that you want to do that. And this information is presented not only on the main runtime station where you are running InduSoft Web Studio, but also from any remote stations, including thin clients, because InduSoft Web Studio has a very distributed architecture created from the ground up with thin clients in mind. So the way it works is you develop the application in a regular PC, and then when the application is done, you can run it locally or download the application to embedded devices at the field, to local HMIs, or to any other PC runtime station in the control room or even at the field. You can even download the application and deploy it on the cloud. InduSoft Web Studio has been successfully deployed in many projects on the cloud, public cloud, private cloud. Many customers are virtualizing their servers, their infrastructure, and InduSoft Web Studio is fully compatible with this kind of architecture. So you could and can download InduSoft Web Studio to a virtual server on the cloud, run it there, acquiring data from different farms, different RTUs, consolidate the information in a central database, and using InduSoft Web Studio as a portal to make this information, online data, and history data available to users on demand. And even if you have different farms and different owners, using the security system from InduSoft Web Studio, you can filter the data available to the thin clients and make the information available to the users based on their credentials, based on the username and password used when they log on to the system. And to visualize the information, remote users can use thin clients where they do not have to install InduSoft Web Studio, the application, or the license. And InduSoft supports 3 types of thin clients. The first one is called Web Thin Clients, where you use just a web browser, Internet Explorer, and you have access to all graphical interfaces from the application. The second type is a Secure Viewer Thin Client, where you just install an app from InduSoft called Secure Viewer, and when you run it, it connects to the runtime application on the server, on the cloud, any runtime station, and displays the information in the thin client station. Using some other applications from InduSoft as well, you can even run a Secure Viewer Thin Client instance and visualize it from a tablet, from an iPad, iPhone, Android tablet, Android phone, or even Windows platforms, and visualize the application from those devices. And also the last solution is called Studio Mobile Access, SMA, and SMA is the native thin client developed by InduSoft on HTML5 to be completely cross-platform. So in the most current version of the product, InduSoft Web Studio 7.1, you can visualize dashboards with tag values, alarms online, you can acknowledge alarms, you can also visualize online in history trends from any device that has a browser with support for HTML5, including iPads, Android devices, iPhones, even Microsoft devices, Mac OS, Linux, and so on and so forth. So you just develop the application once, you configure the settings that should be available to the remote mobile devices, and the same application can be visualized over all those different devices. You do not have to redesign, redevelop the application again for different OSs like iOS, Microsoft, or Android. You develop once, and you can visualize from any remote web browser. Finally, InduSoft Web Studio has a built-in interface to send emails, provide remote notifications, so when alarms happen, InduSoft Web Studio can automatically send an email or even a text message, a SMS message, using gateways from the email providers. And the users, you can receive remote notification immediately when a critical condition happens, and then take actions to minimize the costs incurred by the error. And since InduSoft supports SSL, Security Socket Layer, you can even use email providers like Gmail and Hotmail to send emails through those providers. It's a very easy to configure interface. You just fill in the blanks in this dialog and check a checkbox for the alarm worksheets that should send remote notifications when alarms happen. It's that simple. You can also use the email interface from InduSoft to send reports automatically. So you could generate daily reports, shift reports, weekly reports automatically, attach them to email, and send them by email, all automated without any manual intervention whatsoever, using the schedule feature from InduSoft Web Studio along with our email remote notification interface. And all those features, all those modules are integrated in the standard InduSoft Web Studio. You do not have to install, license, and configure different modules, different products. Everything is built-in and integrated in a single tool. So now I'd like to talk about some real-world applications and case studies available to download from the InduSoft website. The first one is about an application developed by Wilson-Groom for farm automation. and they designed an application within the InduSoft Web Studio to collect data and to automate different feed mills using equipment from Automation Farm Systems, AFS. And if you go to InduSoft Web Studio, to the InduSoft website, we recently, under Solutions Case Studies, we recently published the case study talking about the application. And at this time, I would like to welcome Mr. Jack Wilson from Wilson-Groom, and I will ask him to share his experience with us and talk a little bit about the application they developed within the InduSoft Web Studio. Welcome, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Fabio. This is a little off the cuff as far as how we got started with this. Automatic Farm Systems is a company based out of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, that is a supplier of farm equipment such as screw augers, silos, and so forth. And they came to us with a need for a new automated system for batching at feed mills. And this is at this location. It was primarily chicken and hog feed. The current system that they had actually ran on a Dell computer with an I/O card, an RS-485 card connected to Opto22 modules. And it had a dedicated C++ program that ran the entire process. Needless to say, it was quite difficult for them to maintain and quite impossible for them to make any changes. So they came to us, and we talked about a couple of ways to do this, and we zeroed in on InduSoft Web Studio for two reasons. Mainly, the first reason, of course, it is SCADA graphics. However, under the hood, we could do all of our SQL statements to a database, and that includes any database. We weren't even sure which one we were going to use at the time. Due to the time needed and the learning curve, which actually turned out to be quite short, we decided just to use Access as our database. Now, there are plans in the very near future to port that over to SQL Server. But the main requirements that they needed was to generate recipes. They have about 80 different recipes for all these different types of feeds, and be able to log the data for each and every batch that was created. Currently, their software would only log the final batch, and if they're doing 20 tons at 2 tons at a time, they could not see exactly what happened for each and every mix. So this was a nice feature that they could not do before. So originally, my business partner, Bill Groom, and I got in touch with InduSoft, and actually, as it states on our case study, within that next day, we were on a short little WebEx with Fabio as he went over some of the things and features that we could do with Web Studio, especially from a database standpoint, because that's what this project involved, a lot of database work. We're quite impressed with it, and that's what we propose to our customer. Now, most of these farms and in this industry, many of them are family-owned. They're small farms. And there was one in particular, a customer of AFS, a small family-owned 100-acre farm where they had the original automation for their feed mill. And so we used this farm to do all of our testing and debugging and so forth. And that worked out very, very well because we realized that Carrick Musser, who owns the farm, is not always available to see how his batches are reacting, how the whole process is actually running. It's a one-man show, and he's got other things to do. What would happen on his original system is that a batch would start, and a typical batch might take 2 hours to actually finish of 20 tons of feed. And it may start and then an auger would jam, for instance. He wouldn't know about it until maybe later on in the afternoon when he gets back to see how the batch ran. So he lost literally almost an entire day while his system was sitting idle. What we've done with Web Studio is anytime there's a problem on the system, he is sent via the email feature a text message to his phone that this alarm occurred. And then he can go back to his control room, take care of the alarm, and continue on right where he left off with his batch. Also, we send him a text message when the batch has been completed. So now he's able to carry on taking care of all the duties that needs to be done as a farmer and have his process run at the same time. We are using 2 of the 3 web interfaces that Fabio talked about. We're using the secure viewer over to his house where he can view just as if he were in the control room. We are using also, he has the capability of the web server when he's away from the area and he wants to see if his batches are running. He'll have somebody come in and start batches, but he can then, over the internet and over the web, take a look. We've turned his computer into a web server. Very simple to do. Now, the third one is planned because we have been waiting, I think everyone has, for 7.1 with the SMA. And we plan on using that so that it's very simple for him remotely, just through his, he has an iPhone, to jog these augers. Sometimes when augers jam, that's all it needs is to be jogged a little bit, and the powdery mixture unblocks itself and it starts. So that's in the future. That's in the very near future, actually, that we're going to add that in. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. That we are able to give him everything that he wanted and more. As you can see on the screens, the upper right or the upper left is just an overview that he can view all of his augers, all of his ingredients. The upper right is where actually where he builds a recipe. In this industry, there's 2 types of ingredients, main ingredients such as soy, soybean, or corn, and then there's micro ingredients. And the micro ingredients are things more expensive, such as vitamins, that they may only put a few pounds in for a 4,000-pound batch. So that's where he actually builds the recipe. On the lower left is where we can see that the mains and micros, there's pointers showing him exactly where in the process of this batch. So these pointers are animated based on what step number he's in, so that the user can see exactly where they are in the batch and how many mixes they have to go before the entire batch is complete. And then one thing that Carrick didn't even ask for, but we put it on anyway, was the manual screen. This way he can put every auger or mixer into a manual mode on the screen and be able to run it manually for testing, debugging, or just general maintenance. These are the types of functions that spread out through several screens we're going to use the SMA for. So he got a little more than he bargained for, and it was a great experience for us. We did use an Allen Bradley PLC. The Allen Bradley 1400 had plenty of horsepower to keep the control where it belongs, and that's it at the PLC. That was a major drawback of the original system, because the original system had all of the user interface, which were more or less Windows forms, and the control code built into one. Here we're using Web Studio as the interface, and the PLC doing its job, what it's supposed to do. And then, as I said, we're also using Access as the main database to do all of the data storage. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the access is we're not performing any SQL statements within access. Access was used for one reason only, and that is to store tables. All of the SQL statements are done within the Web Studio scripting. Once we got the hang of it, it was very painless. I had a few questions about syntax, not SQL statement syntax, but how Web Studio interacts with SQL. And that's all it took was a phone call and talk to tech support. And literally within minutes had my answer, and I could continue on with my development. So the tech support and the service from InduSoft really was second to none during the development of this process. But we are glad that we were able to perform all of the SQL, all of the database code within Web Studio. That way, it doesn't matter what database we were going to use, and now or in the future, we're simply using the database for table storage. And that's kind of the rundown. The case study was just posted on Monday. By all means, take a look at it and see what we went through. There it is.
Hello, Mr. Wilson. Thank you very, very much for sharing your experience with us. I do really appreciate it. Great presentation. Like we mentioned here, the case study is available from the InduSoft website under Solutions Case Studies. And at the end of the webinar, if you have any questions to Mr. Wilson, feel free to write them. And I'm sure he'll be kind enough to address every questions about this project or about his experience in this industry. Just one bottom line I'd like to emphasize out of the case study. The feed mixing time has been reduced by approximately 50% as a result of the implementation of the InduSoft Web Studio solution. It's a huge ROI. Sorry?
Absolutely, yes. It was the mixing time, just for the fact that they could acknowledge an alarm and not waste part of a day with the system standing still, was a major benefit to them.
Yeah, I think it was impressed. Congratulations. I believe Wilson-Groom did an excellent job here. But at the end of the day, it's not only a nice project, it's a nice project that really provides the ROI that the customer expects in a very short period of time. So this is the main justification for an automation system like this one, and it's clearly that the benefits are clearly stated here. There are other systems as well. This is another case study available to download from the InduSoft website. Is for farming, irrigations, and by collecting data from sensors and sending data to controllers on the field. The automation system was able to reduce the power consumption from 30 to 70%, depending on the time of the day and current weather conditions, and the water requirements of the lot has been reduced by as much as 90%. Another example where with a small investment in automation, remote notifications, alarms, automation system schedule from InduSoft Web Studio, end users can reap huge benefits, a huge ROI from the automation system. And again, with a very small investment, and those applications can be developed in a very small period of time. Because, again, you don't have to develop code, you don't have to write code, reinvent the wheel from the scratch. InduSoft Web Studio provides all the tools, the library of symbols, the drivers, the connectivity to database, the connectivity to remote devices. All you have to do is to configure the application in a user-friendly interface. And you can deploy an application with a very high aggregated value in a very short period of time. So with that, I'd like to open for Q&A. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the Q&A box or in the chat box from InduSoft. So one question here is, how does one send SMS? Mr. Wilson, be free to jump in and talk about your experience, but really quick, from the technical point of view in InduSoft, you can, here on the development environment, go to what we call email interface, and you connect to an email server. And then when you configure the alarms, you can go to email settings and configure here the email addresses. Especially for North America, all the major cell phone providers provide a gateway free of charge from email to SMS. All you have to do is to write the phone number at in the name of the provider, for instance, mobile.net. And then InduSoft will send the email, and this provider will automatically forward this email as an SMS message to this phone number. And if you don't know the name of the providers for different carriers, for different cell phone companies, you can go to the InduSoft website. Here on the blog, just search for instance, SMS. In InduSoft, in a blog here, advanced tips, how to send SMS messages, show here the syntax for all the major providers here in North America. So, for instance, for T-Mobile, you just write the telephone number with area code at tmomail.net. So InduSoft sends the email, but this email is automatically transformed in SMS message by T-Mobile and sent to the cell phone, and so on and so forth for different providers. And Mr. Wilson, I assume you used something similar to that in the project, correct?
You're spot on. That's exactly what we did. We simply put in his phone number at vtex.com, and which is for Verizon, and that's where we send the email to for either the alarm or use the event scheduler and look for the end of the batch to complete. And then in the event that was the event is to send out that email with the email function within Web Studio.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, one more question. There is one question here about the learning curve, how long it took for you to learn InduSoft Web Studio and design and deploy this project.
I would say it's kind of a tough one to answer, but it was relatively short. We are experienced in some of the other packages out there, such as Wonderware and Rockwell, and those learning curves, I feel, are much longer. Using Web Studio and the fact that just about everything you want to do are through worksheets. Once I understood everything about worksheets, the learning curve just almost went to nothing. Very intuitive as far as even on animations, how to animate something. Especially with version 7 with the ribbon, with the new ribbon at the top. We found it very easy to animate and use tags within those animations to help control them. So all in all, the learning curve was very short for us to concentrate on the actual application itself.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question is, where do I start setting up an event recording to a database in steps 1, 2, and 3? So I can make a quick demonstration here from my computer. We can use different databases. Let's use, for example, Microsoft Access. I'm going to launch here. And I will create a new database here. Let's call it, let's say, webinar. Create a simple MDB file. Great. Very well. It is done. Now from InduSoft Web Studio, I can create a new project. So I'm going to do everything from scratch. Let's call this project webinar, for example. Do something quick and dirty here. Very well. And then I can configure my alarms, for example. So I can create a tag A, for example. When tag A is higher than 80, I want to show the message tank level too high, for example. And I say I want to save to the history when the alarm is generated, acknowledged, and normalized. Very well. I can have, for instance, a tag D, enable here the event logger, and say I want to log whenever the tag D changes of value and sends the message motor on, for example. Any message. And I may want to log into the trend the values of tag A and tag B or any other tag and save this data every second, for example. Very well. So now just to simulate the values, I create a simple graphical interface, a button here. So when I click to this button, I exit the application, shut down. And then just to simulate values, I can create a slider here on the screen to change the values of tag A. So here I will change the values from tag A. I will also create a button, another button here, to toggle the value of tag D. So when I click here, I change the value of tag D. And might even change the color of this button according to the value of tag D. Since I have some alarms, I can use this control to display the online alarms. Use the same control and change the type to alarm history to show the history of alarms. And use the same control to show the history of events, for example. So change here the background color to white to differentiate. And in columns, I will add the event time column. Very well. Finally, I still have some space. I'll use here the trend control to display information from the tags A and tag B. So paste here, define the colors for those pens, and tag B goes from 0 to 1 because it's a Boolean. This one goes from 0 to 100. Good enough. I can save this screen as the main screen, set as the startup, and run it. So far, I have not linked to the databases yet. InduSoft is using the proprietary files. If the information if the tag A goes beyond 80, I see the alarm. If I toggle tag B, InduSoft generates the event, and I have the information on the trend. So far, InduSoft is saving everything to the InduSoft proprietary files. If I want to link it to the database, all I have to do is go to Project, Options, here in the Default Database, and click on this link where it shows all the different providers for different databases in my computer. So for access, we use the JET provider. You can browse here for the MDB file. I believe it was under my documents with the name webinar.mdb. So just browse for the MDB file, test the connection, succeeded. Very well. So I built a connection with the database. Now for alarms and events, all I have to say is save and read alarms and events from the database. For the trains, all I have to say is save and read the history information for those tags from the database. And it is pretty much done. If I run the application, InduSoft connects to the database, creates the necessary tables, and as you see here, when I simulate alarms, I see the history of alarms. If I change the value of tag B, I see here the history of tag B. In the train control, I see the history of change for tag A and tag B. And all this information is being, in fact, saved to the MDB database file. If I open this database again with access, just by clicking here, you see that InduSoft created the tables automatically. And if I go to the alarm history, I have the alarms. If I go to the event history, I have the changes of tag B. If I go to the train history, I have timestamp by default saving every second, and the values of tag A and tag B at each second. So it's that simple to save information to a database. And one last comment here. Like Mr. Wilson mentioned, sometimes you develop the application and deploy, let's say, to an MDB file, a simple database, but eventually the project grows and you need a database that can handle more data, like Microsoft SQL Server. Even the Express version is free of charge with up to 10 gigabytes. So just to make a quick demonstration here, I'm going to create a new database in SQL Server. Let's call it, let's say, webinar, for lack of a more creative name. So just created here the database called webinar. There are no tables. It's a brand new database. And now from InduSoft Web Studio, all I have to do is go to options, go to database connection, and change here the provider from JET to the SQL Server provider. Here, I browse or type the name of the server where SQL Server is running. And here I can browse all the databases from that particular server. So in this case, I'm going to use the database called Webinar. Test connection succeeded. Very well. And if I run the application again, I can still simulate alarms and see alarms here in the history, acknowledge alarms, events, and history of trains as well. So if I go back here to SQL Server, you see that InduSoft creates the table automatically for you. And if I open those tables, you have all the information there for the alarm history, for the event history, for the trains, and everything else. So I wanted to show that whether you save to proprietary files or to Access or to SQL Server or to any other database, you pretty much do not have to redesign the application at all. The screen didn't change at all whether I was using a proprietary history files, MDB files, or SQL Server files. There is a layer of abstraction there, and all you have to do is design the screens with the layout you want, create the tags, configure the alarms, and then in one central dialog, tell InduSoft where the data should be saved to and where the information should be retrieved from. And if you have to change it in the future, you do not have to redesign your whole application. So hopefully it addresses the question about a quick demonstration, 1, 2, 3, on how to link InduSoft to a database, save data to the database, retrieve it, and show it on the screen. And Mr. Wilson, I assume you used the same techniques or similar techniques in your project, correct?
Yes, exactly. And I had mentioned at the beginning that we're going to port this over to Microsoft SQL Server from Access, and that is quite simple because right on the Microsoft website they have a conversion utility to download and convert Access over to SQL, and that's what you just demonstrated is exactly what we're going to do. You just change the link or the connection string to a different database, but the tables are all the same.
Got it.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah. Another question is if it's possible to do the same thing with Excel 2007 database. It's very similar. The one difference is that here it's very, very similar to what we have done so far. The difference is that here on the provider you select the JET provider. Here you have to browse and type the name of the actual Excel file, XLS or XLSX. I have not created the Excel file yet, but you just type here the path in the name of the Excel file. And here in all, under extended properties, you type Excel 8.0. That's the trick. By doing that, then InduSoft will be able to save data to Excel, retrieve data from Excel. But I would recommend to use Excel for simple reports, but not for history data. One, because it was not designed for that. After a few thousand rows, a few thousand records, the performance will be very low, and Excel itself does not have capacity to store too many rows, too many records. Number two, the provider for Excel does not allow you to delete data just like in other databases. So if you just want to use this interface to push data to Excel and generate reports, a daily report, something like that, no problem at all. It works very easily. If you want to generate a actual history to a database, I strongly recommend using an MDB file, or even better, Microsoft SQL Express, which is still free of charge, and it's designed to support much more data than Excel is, for example. Just one last tip. If you have specific questions during your development on how to connect to different databases, you can go to the help from InduSoft under database interface, and here in appendices, we give you a step-by-step on how to connect to different databases, including Excel. So if you come here to Excel, we show here, select this provider, go to extended properties. If it is Excel 2010, you write Excel 12.0. If it is Excel 2007 or earlier, you write Excel 8.0. But all the tips and tricks are readily available here on the help file. A few more questions. Some compliments for you as well, Mr. Wilson. Good job. How many tags were used for the farm automation project?
For that automation project was not very many. It was about 1,800 tags, and that's controlling approximately 20 augers. And I used the class. I could create a class called auger, so that buried inside of each tag I had all the same type of information. And with all those classes and all the augers, it came out to around 17 or 1,800 tags. Yeah. A little different than the next project we're working on is actually a Wonderware conversion to InduSoft that's got 22,000. So that'll be a little more involved.
Very well. And InduSoft has actually many different license levels for different project sizes, from 150 tags to 300 tags to 1,500 tags to 4,000, 16,000, 32,000, 64,000, 512,000, and 10 million tags. So the project is extremely scalable, and you can start small, and as your project evolves, you can keep upgrading the license to the next level, and there is no penalty fee to upgrade the license. You just pay the price difference between the license you own and the next level you want to upgrade to. One change here, one question here is, does InduSoft have the facility to receive SMS and do a specific function according to the SMS received? We have the capability to do that through external ActiveX controls or .NET controls that are able to receive SMS messages through a GSM modem, and then just using APIs, use it in InduSoft. So it's not a built-in function, but since InduSoft is an ActiveX container and a .NET control container, if you Google for controls from other companies available to sell that receive SMS messages through a GSM modem, you can integrate this ActiveX control in InduSoft and then trigger different actions depending on the message that you receive. One question here is if can I change the timeline in the trained object? Yes, you can change the timeline in the trained object in many different ways. Not sure if you want to do something like just changing here the date and time during the runtime, or zoom in, zoom out, change the duration. You can do all that. If you want even to hide the timeline and create your own, you can also do that. Let's go really quick here to the configuration. And here in the trained control, you can go to Access and not show, for instance, the time bar, not show the scroll bar if you do not want to. So select here Start Date and Time and use tags to control the duration, the periods for the trained control, and another tag to define the start date, so you can define which period of time the trained control will display at any time. So either during the runtime to operate the trained control, or during the development phase, you can customize the trained control and the timeline to work with any layout and in any way you want. Like I said, here in the built-in timeline, you can change here, for instance, the duration to 2 seconds. And a very interesting feature as well that is kind of unique for InduSoft, you can apply offsets to pins. So if I go back here to the trained control, I can go to points and say, for instance, tag A, and let's change here the label to A offset, OF, to from 0 to 100. But here in options, we can create another tag for what we call X-axis offset, for instance, C. And I'm doing something tricky here, but you can create a much more sophisticated interface in our projects. So I'm going to copy this slider here to control the value of the tag C during the runtime. Save it. Okay, so now I have tag A in 2 pens here. I'm going to even delete pen D, so I have tag A in 2 pens. What is interesting and nice about this offset is that if I change the value of the offset tag during the runtime, look what happens. Well, if I change tag C, I didn't save the changes here to this control. So offset X is tag C. Save it. Very well. So by changing the value of tag C, it changes the offset only at 10, and you can compare the same variable with different timestamps. So you can visualize, for instance, the level for today and compare how the level changed 1 month ago, or 1 day ago, or 1 week ago. So you can very easily change the offset for 1 pen or a group of pens just by changing the value of 1 tag, using just this offset feature from the point. Some other compliments to Mr. Wilson as well. Is MySQL a reliable choice as a database? It's a personal opinion, but in my opinion, yes. We have used MySQL in many projects, I would say even large projects. I can tell it didn't do the work, it did the work. But like any other open source software, the main problem comes when you need technical support. Since it's completely free of charge, if you have questions or if you need some information, you need to rely on the community. So InduSoft Web Studio fully supports MySQL. It works. We have many projects successfully deployed with it. But again, it's an open source product, so you have to, there are some caveats, and especially when it comes to technical support from that product when you use an open source product like MySQL. Another question is, I need to relate tags in OPC with addresses in Modbus TCP standard driver sheets. Where do I begin? Not sure exactly what you need to do, but I have some assumptions here. One is that you want to read data from Modbus using the standard Modbus driver and expose this information to other systems through OPC. In this case, under drivers, you can use the MoTCP driver. And here in the MoTCP driver, you link tags from InduSoft with registers from a remote device. For instance, something like this. So here you read data from this device using the Modbus driver and read the value from the holding register 1 to the tag A, for example. Now, if you want to send the value of this tag A to an external OPC server, all we have to do is create an OPC client worksheet, select here the OPC server, and say here I want to send the value of the tag A from InduSoft to the item, whatever it is, the item name from the OPC server. If you want to expose the information from the tag A to an external OPC client, literally all you have to do is start the OPC server task from InduSoft Web Studio. And all the tags from the application, including tag A, will be automatically available to remote OPC clients GA. So this is another beauty from the architecture from InduSoft Web Studio. You can configure the same tag in many different interfaces, and we can read information through one interface and then make this information available through other interfaces. You don't have to create additional tags just because you want to read through Modbus and send through OPC. If your question is more like my device talks Modbus, but I cannot use a native driver, my customer demands that I use OPC, all you have to do is to purchase an OPC server for Modbus and install your OPC server in the application and link your OPC server, Kepler, Matricon, whatever it is, to the OPC client from InduSoft. But if your device talks Modbus, you can talk directly with it using the built-in Modbus driver, and you do not have to purchase or configure a external OPC server. So with that, I believe we covered all the questions, and I would like to take this moment just to provide some contact information for InduSoft. If you have more questions about InduSoft, if you want the contact from Wilson-Groom, from Mr. Wilson, feel free to contact us. We'll be more than happy to provide any answers you want. And I'd like to thank everybody, especially Mr. Wilson, for sharing his experience with us. I hope the webinar has been useful for you, and I hope to see you again in the next session. Thank you very much, and have a great day.